The wave hit the bridge windows at 0312 hours, and the glass held, barely. The sound it made was not the sound of water. It was the sound of a physical force that has decided, with the particular impersonal violence of open ocean in a Category 4 storm, that the distinction between inside and outside is a human convenience it has chosen not to honor tonight. 40 kilometers from the Philippine coastline, in seas that the weather system had underestimated by a margin that would later require an official explanation, a Russian naval vessel was losing the argument it had been having with the storm for the past 6 hours. The crew knew it, the captain knew it, and at 0314 hours, with water entering the lower decks faster than the pumps could address, they did the only thing left to do. They sent the signal.
The distress signal traveled at the speed of radio waves, instantaneous, indifferent to the conditions that had produced it, carrying in its encoded frequency the complete operational picture of a vessel in crisis. Position, heading, rate of water ingress, number of crew, sea state at location, wind speed. The signal reached the Russian Naval Coordination Center first, received, processed, and assessed by officers who understood immediately and completely what the numbers meant. 11-meter wave height, wind at 62 knots, visibility at 40 meters, 40 kilometers of open water between the nearest rescue asset and the stricken vessel. The assessment took 4 minutes. The decision took less than 1. They could not reach that vessel in those conditions without losing the rescue asset as well. They stood down. 4 minutes and 17 seconds after the Russian Coordination Center received the signal, the Philippine Navy's Maritime Rescue Command received the same data. The same position, the same wave height, the same wind speed, the same 40 kilometers of black, storm-churned water between the coast and a vessel that was taking on water at a rate that the crew's own damage control report described in the clipped, factual language of sailors who are too busy to be dramatic as unmanageable. The officer on duty at the Philippine Maritime Rescue Command read the data. Then he read it again, not because he had not understood it the first time, but because what he was about to do required him to be certain that he understood it completely. He picked up the radio. He said 4 words. He said, "Prepare the vessel immediately."
The Philippine Navy rescue vessel that launched into that storm at 0331 hours was not the largest asset in the fleet. It was not equipped with the most advanced technology that maritime rescue operations can deploy. What it had been built to be through decades of operating in the waters of an archipelago that produces some of the most violent and unpredictable sea conditions in the Pacific, was the right vessel for this specific night. Its crew had trained in conditions that most naval programs would classify as beyond operational parameters, not because those conditions were ideal for training, but because those conditions were simply present. The ordinary weather of a coastline that sits in the path of more tropical storms per year than almost any other inhabited place on Earth. They did not choose this expertise. The ocean gave it to them.
The first 40 minutes were about survival, the rescue vessel's own survival. Waves that the instruments recorded at between 9 and 11 meters came from 3 directions simultaneously, the storm having reached the particular chaotic phase where the swells it had generated earlier were now colliding with the new waves it was producing and creating a sea state that had no consistent pattern and offered no predictable rhythm that a helmsman could work with. The Philippine Navy helmsman worked without rhythm. He worked on instinct, on the thousands of hours of sea time that had built inside him a relationship with water and motion that operated faster than conscious thought, reading the wave faces in the darkness through some combination of instrument data and physical sensation that he could not have explained but did not need to explain. He kept the vessel moving forward.
At 0401 hours, the rescue vessel's radar made contact with the Russian ship. What the radar showed was not reassuring. The vessel's position had shifted significantly from the last reported coordinates, pushed by the storm in a direction that had moved it further from the coastline and deeper into the worst of the weather system. Its radar signature showed a vessel that was listing, the distinctive angle of a ship that has taken on enough water to affect its stability but has not yet reached the point of no return. That point, the rescue vessel's commander calculated from the drift rate and the rate of water ingress in the last damage control report, was approximately 90 minutes away. He had covered 22 kilometers in 30 minutes. He had 18 kilometers remaining and 90 minutes before the calculation changed permanently.
The communication with the Russian vessel was broken, the storm interference reducing radio contact to fragments of transmission that arrived incomplete and out of sequence. What the Philippine rescue commander could piece together from those fragments painted a picture that the complete transmissions would have painted more clearly, but no more honestly. The lower decks were compromised, the crew had moved to the upper sections, the pumps were losing. The captain's voice, in the fragments that came through clearly enough to be understood, had the particular quality that experienced maritime officers recognize in commanders who have assessed their situation with complete honesty and found the assessment to be very serious. It was not panic, it was something more controlled and therefore more informative. It was the voice of a man who understood precisely how much time he had left and was using every second of it.
At 04:23 a.m., the rescue vessel crested a wave and for one moment, 3 seconds, at the apex of 11 meters of moving water, the Philippine commander could see the Russian vessel with his own eyes. What he saw in those 3 seconds, illuminated by a lightning strike that turned the entire seascape white for an instant, stopped his breath completely. The Russian ship was not listing at the angle the radar had suggested. It was listing at an angle significantly beyond that, an angle that the commander's experience told him was past the threshold where pumps and damage control could reverse the situation without external assistance. And it was moving. Not under power, the storm was moving it, pushing it toward a shallowing section of seabed that, if the vessel reached it at that angle and that speed, would end the situation in a way that made the next 60 minutes absolute.
The commander made 3 decisions in the following 90 seconds that the after-action report would later describe as the operational turning point of the rescue. First, he altered course to intercept the drifting vessel's projected position rather than its current position, calculating where the storm would push it in the time it would take the rescue vessel to close the remaining distance. Second, he ordered the rescue team to prepare for a transfer operation in sea conditions that the team's training protocols classified as at the outer limit of survivable. Third, he did not tell his crew what the radar had shown him about the vessel's angle. He told them what the mission required. He told them they had 40 minutes, and that 40 minutes was enough. He said it with the particular steady authority of a commander who has decided that the truth of the situation and the needs of his crew are not the same thing in this moment.
The Filipino rescue divers who entered the water at 04:41 hours entered it in conditions that will not be described here with the clinical detachment of a technical report, because clinical detachment would be a dishonesty. The water was black, the waves were moving in multiple directions at heights that made the surface a dynamic, constantly reconfiguring landscape of water that offered no stable reference point and no predictable behavior. The wind was driving rain horizontally at a speed that reduced visibility to meters. And somewhere in that darkness, connected to the rescue vessel by lines that the storm was doing everything in its considerable power to compromise, 4 Filipino Navy divers were moving through open ocean toward a vessel that was running out of time at a rate that their commander had chosen not to share with them. They moved anyway, because that is what they had come to do.
Paragraph 11, 144 words. What happened in the 41 minutes between the divers entering the water and the first Russian crew member being transferred to the rescue vessel is documented in the after-action report with a level of technical detail that fills 23 pages. What those 23 pages cannot document, because after-action reports are written by people who were not in the water, is what it cost. The physical cost of moving through 11-meter seas in the dark, the psychological cost of maintaining the precise, focused competence that a rescue operation requires when every physical signal the body is sending is communicating a different priority with considerable urgency. The cost of doing, in conditions that the instruments said were beyond operational parameters, the work that the instruments had never been designed to measure. 4 Filipino Navy divers paid that cost, every one of them, without stopping.
The Russian crew members who came across the transfer line came one at a time, the only safe method in those sea conditions, each transfer a separate operation requiring the full attention of both the divers in the water and the deck crew on the rescue vessel. Each transfer took between 4 and 7 minutes. There were 23 crew members on the Russian vessel. The mathematics of that, 23 transfers at an average of 5.5 minutes each, produced a total transfer time that sat against the commander's 90-minute window like a calculation that had been designed to arrive at the last possible moment and nowhere earlier. The Philippine crew worked the mathematics with the focused efficiency of people who understood exactly what the numbers meant and had decided collectively and without discussion that the numbers were going to work out. The 22nd crew member came across at 0509 hours. One crew member remained on the Russian vessel, the captain, who had stayed aboard in the tradition that the sea imposes on commanders and that no amount of practical argument has ever successfully displaced. The rescue vessel commander looked at his instruments. The Russian vessel's list had increased by 4 degrees in the last 20 minutes. The section of shallowing seabed was closer. The storm had not moderated. He had 1 crew member remaining to extract, and a vessel that the data suggested had between 15 and 25 minutes of stability remaining, a window wide enough to be survivable and narrow enough to be the most dangerous 15 minutes of the entire operation. He told the divers. They went back into the water.
The Russian captain came across the transfer line at 0521 hours, 34 minutes before the Russian vessel's remaining stability expired, according to the post-incident analysis conducted 3 weeks after the rescue. He came across the line the way men come across lines in conditions like those, not gracefully, not according to any procedure that training had specifically anticipated, but with the raw, determined physicality of a man who has understood completely what the alternative looks like, and has decided that the line, however it behaves in 11-meter seas, is preferable to everything behind him. When he reached the deck of the Philippine rescue vessel and the crew pulled him aboard, he did not speak. He looked at the faces of the Filipino sailors around him, their faces wet, their hands still moving with the automatic efficiency of people who had not yet fully processed that the operation was complete. He looked at them for a long moment. Then he sat down on the deck and put his face in his hands. The Russian vessel went under at 0555 hours, 34 minutes after its captain left it. The Philippine rescue vessel was 3 kilometers away when it happened, making its return through seas that had not moderated and would not moderate for another 4 hours. Nobody on the rescue vessel watched it go. They were busy, attending to 23 crew members who needed warmth and medical assessment and the particular, careful human attention that people require after the specific experience of understanding that they came very close to dying and did not. The Philippine Navy medics moved through the survivors with the quiet, professional competence that the situation required. The rescue vessel's crew managed the vessel through conditions that had not become easier. And the commander stood at the helm and drove his vessel home through a storm that had already shown him everything it had.
The after-action report that the Philippine Navy submitted took 11 days to complete. 11 days because the operation had involved decisions and conditions and outcomes that the standard reporting framework required significant additional documentation to capture accurately. The report ran to 47 pages. Its technical sections covered sea state, vessel performance, crew deployment, medical outcomes, and the operational timeline with the precision that military documentation requires. Its conclusion section, the part that senior officers read first and junior officers study longest, was 3 paragraphs. The first paragraph summarized the operation. The second paragraph noted the conditions under which it had been conducted. The third paragraph contained a single sentence that the report's author had written last, after 11 days of assembling everything that had come before it, because it was the sentence that everything else in the 47 pages had been building toward.
The sentence said, all 23 crew members of the vessel were recovered alive, in conditions that the pre-operation assessment had classified as beyond the threshold for survivable rescue operations, by a crew that treated that classification as a starting point rather than a conclusion. The Russian Naval Command received the report 4 days after it was submitted. The response that came back through official channels was formal, the correct language of one military establishment acknowledging the actions of another in the precise, measured vocabulary that international military communication requires. What came through unofficial channels, through the conversations between naval officers that happen in the spaces where official language does not reach, was different. It was the kind of acknowledgement that does not require careful wording because it is not being recorded. It was simply the truth, stated plainly between people who understood exactly what it meant.
The Philippine Navy divers who had gone into the water that night received their unit commendations in a ceremony that was not public and was not reported. The commander who had made the decision to launch received his commendation in the same ceremony, along with a notation in his service record that described the operation in language that service records use when the action being described is at the outer edge of what service records are designed to capture. The crew members who had worked the transfer lines and managed the deck operations and provided medical care to 23 survivors received their commendations collectively, their names listed in a document that most people who will ever know this story will never have access to. They did not seek the access. They had not done what they did for the document. They had done it because the signal came in at 03:14 hours and the vessel was 40 kilometers away and 23 people were running out of time.
The stretch of water where the Russian vessel went under is unmarked. The ocean does not mark its significant locations. It simply continues, indifferent to what has happened in any particular part of it, producing the same waves and the same weather and the same darkness that it produced on the night of the rescue and will produce on every night that follows. 40 kilometers from the Philippine coastline, in water that the storm has long since smoothed back to its ordinary surface, there is nothing to indicate that anything occurred there. No monument, no marker, no visible evidence of the 41 minutes that 4 Filipino Navy divers spent in that water, or the decisions that were made in the minutes before they entered it, or the 23 lives that were on the other side of those decisions. The ocean keeps no records. The people who were there carry them instead. Paragraph 20. 157 words. Somewhere on the Philippine coastline tonight, a Navy rescue crew is on standby. Not because a vessel is in distress. The night is clear, the seas are manageable, the weather systems are behaving. They are on standby because that is what standby means. Ready. Before the signal comes, before the assessment is made, before the conditions are known. Ready in the particular, disciplined, unglamorous way that rescue crews are ready. Not with the adrenaline of imminent action, but with the quiet, maintained preparedness of people who have understood something fundamental about their purpose. That when the signal comes at 03:14 hours in an 11-meter sea, 40 kilometers from the coast, the time for deciding whether to go has already passed. The decision was made long before that. It was made the day they joined. It was made every day since. It is the only decision that matters, and it has only ever had one answer.